Axis partisans. In the production phase, they select hexes they want to attack and pay 2 production points each from their budget. They then roll a die for each hex to determine the results. If they get a 1 or a 2, they get control of the hex. Otherwise, they fail. The problem with this is they end up with an unsupplied hex usually. This could be useful for knocking out production points because you're paying 2 points and it's going to cost the Axis 3 points to rebuild it. So it's kind of an attritional thing, but you only have a 1/3 chance of taking the hex with the partisan. So it's not a very good payoff. There are better ways to attrition the Axis using bombers and such now. Now, there's unfortunately a lie here, and this is caught in the errata, which says you can rebuild devastated production there even in the same turn of capture. Yeah, you can't, because at the end of your combat phase, you no longer control the hex. Well, you can, but in particular, what they say here, if a captured hex is not in supply, he must forge a supply source to it by the end of his next turn's combat phase. No, that's not true. And you can only rebuild production if you have supply. Again, this all combines to make Great Britain unable to be captured for long. Germans are allowed to build U-boats. They have a couple of them at the beginning of the game. Those guys actually start at port, really. What they're going to do is they're allowed to roll on the firepower table during the strategic warfare phase. And the losses will be deductions to the Allied production. You're also allowed to do plink shots at units transferring through the Atlantic with them. Let's see where that comes. I don't know if that's actually covered in here. It probably is under transatlantic shipping. The Ally has the chance to build anti-submarine war units. And they have a little counter to keep track of how many they have there. There's a limit here to how much damage you can do. Until the U.S. joins, you can only do 8 production per turn to the Allied budgets. After that, you can do 24. Yeah, but the U.S. adds a lot. Okay. Where are we here? Anti-submarine warfare. So ASW is going to make an attack also on the firepower table against any submarines that are out at sea before the subs get to fire, and they just do damage to the submarines. ASW never get destroyed. Okay, transatlantic shipping. When the U.S. joins the Allies, the first 6 strength points must start in the United States. Once the U.S. joins, I can buy additional transatlantic shipping. I'm only going to be allowed to send 3 units per turn initially, but I can buy these up at a cost of 1 production point per strength point that I'm going to transport. At the end of any Allied movement phase in which I've moved at least a strength point between America and Europe, the Axis gets to attack with his U-boats at sea on the firepower table. Each loss removes a transported strength point and a transatlantic shipping point, but no lower than 3 there. Okay. Strategic bombing is going to be using... you have to build the bombers to begin with, and you're also allowed to build bomber escorts, which we'll talk about too. The initial cost is quite high, but it goes down to something fairly reasonable eventually. In fact, it's initially impossible, I think, for everybody except the Allies. Yeah, the Germans don't have strategic bombing to begin with. The way this is going to work is, let's see how they state it. Finding the rules that I want, that I know I have here. Well, okay. So the way you're going to be doing this is you're going to be attacking enemy industry using the firepower table. And, you want to cause a hit or 2 hits or whatever. You can't do more than that particular hex has. And you're going to be shooting hexes within 4 of one of your controlled hexes. So, you know, if you own France, you can bomb all the way up into Manchester. 1, 2, 3. Actually, you can hit Edinburgh even. You know, you've got tremendous range with these suckers if you have strategic bombers. Historically, the Germans didn't, but historically they did perform a bombing campaign with the TAC-Air, and there are no rules for that, unfortunately. Okay, but before you get to bomb, what's going to happen is the defender has his anti-air or air defense thing, which is going to also be just a roll on the firepower table. Now, this number can get quite big too, and that's going to be an attempt to shoot down bombers as they're coming in. Unlike ASWs, though, air defense isn't permanent. You can counter it by building bomber escorts. Each bomber escort you have reduces the air defense by 1. And you can stockpile them up, I guess. I don't know. There's a space for that. Okay. You also have strategic missiles. Missiles have only a range of 2. And their cost is low compared to the bombers, at least at the... It takes a lot of tech to get it, though. And what they're going to do is only have a range of 2, and they are destroyed when they're fired. But there's no defense against them. And they will also, and I believe also the bombers, affect national morale, if I can find that. No. Okay. Yeah. So you have the option to fire either at industry or at national morale. And if you fire at national morale, you just knock down the morale points of the nation you're hitting. Speaking of national morale, only 2 countries have this. Let me pull my plug. Hopefully I have a lot of... no. All right. You have a number of things that can affect it. An atomic bomb does 4. Each hit with morale bombing does some. Losing a bunch of hexes or gaining a bunch of hexes gets you morale, but you only get 1 per turn from that. And then some specific hexes and some political events like the U.S. The United States joins Axis. How can that happen? That can't be good. The only way I can see that happening is if the Brits attack the U.S., and that would just be foolish. They're the same faction. But there are rules for Germany to attack Italy and all, all kinds of stuff that no one would do playing this game. Anyway, if the national morale ever hits 0, the country surrenders. If a country's morale is 5 or less, it has to add 1 to all of its attack die rolls. If Britain surrenders, the -1 attack modifier is no longer in effect. I don't know what that is. Somewhere or another, there's a -1 attack modifier, and I don't know where that rule exists. Perhaps I will find it. Probably not. Okay. Then we go to optional rules. Leadership. Leaders are essentially counters. That's not one. That give you a -1 on any of your attacks with the army they're positioned with. And basically, for every 10 strength points, ground strength points that you have in your force pool, you're going to be able to hold 1 leader. You're allowed 1 leader per army, and they're just thrown in a cup and pulled at random and placed face down on different armies as you like. Then when the army actually engages in a use of one of the combat tables, you flip it over and see what you got. If it's a no leader, it goes back in the cup, and you'll be able to regain, you'll be able to draw more leaders based on the ones that you've tried to get. If your unit takes damage, however, you have a chance, I think 1 in 6, of losing your leader. All of the unaligned forces have their own little force pools now, which will just be strength points wandering around on their own on the board. They have a restriction where no more than 2 can be placed in the capital at first, and that just makes some of the minors a little harder to take. They're really trivial in the more basic games. Specific rules relating to the Italian army, which is that the Axis always has to keep strength points in Italian territory and or in the Italian army. Now, if I recall correctly, there's a penalty on some of these units. The Italian and Romanian armies have a penalty on the die roll. And again, I'm not seeing that, and I don't remember reading it this last time, but I remember it in normal play. I'm not going to hunt it down right now. But if you want to have Italian units, that you're required to have, which is 4 infantry and a mech, always have to be in Italian control, either in a yellow area or in the Italian army. That means that you're going to have this penalty with those units, and I don't remember where I found it. It's probably under the Italian army rules. All advanced attempts made by the Italian army in friendly hexes, 1 must be added to the advanced die roll. I seem to remember something like that with the Romanian army too. I don't know where to find it though. When you got like 4 rule sets all jumbled together, it's probably in the minor allies rule here. I don't see it. I don't know. Anyway, maybe the Romanians have that penalty. So now fleets are going to take a more detailed role in the game. At the beginning of the movement phase, a player moves his ship strength points back to port, and then he can sail out as he wishes. He can either move to another port or to a full sea or coastal hex. The fleets pose a 7-hex influence zone. Now, that influence zone is important for some activities, but not for others. So, for example, an invasion crossing the Atlantic gets to be shot at every hex, whereas other factors, like if you want to attack a fleet just that's on the board sitting there, you have to be within the 7-hex range. Also, raids. If a raid is trying to pass through that 7-hex range, it's got a possibility of being intercepted on the way. Raids are going to allow the Germans to put a fleet in this box. They can't be attacked when they're in there. No, you can intercept anywhere in the Atlantic, I guess. I don't know. You have to make a roll for interception to intercept a raid. If you fail, you go back to port. If you succeed, you get to hunt it down with a naval battle, which is just going to be firepower versus firepower. Ship builds. Ships cost a lot, so you can actually pay them off partially using the development track here, and that's what that's for. And finally, aircraft carriers, which work just like normal ship points, and this option gives the Brits 3 extra points of aircraft carriers just out of nowhere, So if this was a finely balanced game, the options clearly can unbalance it, but I don't think there's any real terrible attempt to be tremendously balanced with this game. So when you use carriers in a naval battle, their strength points are going to be tripled on the firepower table. I think naval units are doubled, just to get the right kind of casualty levels that they wanted or something. And they do a first strike with their air units before the naval units get to fight. Carriers can also use TAC air in support of the invading army. However, they can't do support fire, and they can't take losses. If carriers are in a fleet by themselves, though, they'll be wiped out if they meet surface ships. But this rule is so poorly written. They're automatically eliminated when at sea in the same hex as an enemy fleet holding at least one capital ship. This occurs at any time before, during, or after a battle, regardless of the winner. Carriers always get their attack in battle before being eliminated. What? So if I wipe out the enemy, am I still eliminated then? I don't know. And that's the kind of crap in these rules that just, probably metagaming didn't do a better job with them, but I damn well know that Avalon Hill failed again in a developmental task. And, well, you don't see Don Greenwood's name on this one, but he did all the development, and really, really bad track record in my mind. Anyway, that's what we have for the game. Bunch of additional information here. I'm going to be faking rules left and right. I'm probably going to be screwing things up. That's okay, because I don't think the game, was fully developed, and I don't think I don't think the rules absolutely reflect what was intended in the design. In particular, capture of Great Britain and then surrendering. So I'll probably make something up to deal with that. All right, I'm going to send this one and other factors too. I kind of like the Navy's interception rules, but it's like done as a patchwork where they're in and out. So don't expect me to be playing this purely by the rules, but I'll get the core of them right. One thing to worry about that I want to point out from a prior playing, because I know I'm on 2 videos here anyway, and I'm going to have to put it through the damn... I may just make two separate entries. It's easier for me by a lot to do that. One thing that I ran into with a friend when we were playing is if the Germans don't build, perhaps because they know they can't actually conquer Britain, if they don't build the bombers to strike Britain, bombers they never historically built, the heavy bombers, right? But there's no other way to do it within the game rules. If they don't build the bombers to strike Britain's morale or industry, the Brits don't build the anti-air value, which means late in the war, as the Germans, you're really vulnerable to British bombers because you've probably improved your own bombers. The Brits are actually able to get maybe a head start on building them. And it's the interleaving of these kind of rules and what it all means that can cause some real issues with this game. Like I said, I don't think that it accurately handles many circumstances of the war, but I think it is a very, very intriguing little design, and it's done very much on this kind of intuitive basis. Improve the technology, it improves the cost, that fundamental idea, the fundamental idea of how the combat works. All very clever little things, but they all make so much sense. But I don't think it hangs together terribly well when you put it together. We'll get more to that after I do the playthrough. Maybe I'll come up with more insight than I've had, because I haven't played this a whole hell of a lot. I actually had, when I saw Supreme Commander, had some hopes that maybe that would be a replacement for this, but I just couldn't pull the trigger on it. I'm going to let things kind of sit out there and bake before, and in some ways I think maybe it was a good idea but I'm finding getting things off the used market, or if something's not an absolute must buy off one of my series, I'm just not willing to pony up the money up front. I don't want to end up with so many P500s that I can't figure out what the hell I want to buy out of the reject bin. From what I've heard, with the damage done with Supreme Commander, it may well be heading there pretty quickly. I know they put, GMT did the right thing and put out replacement counter sheets and stuff, but I don't know if a game can survive that kind of opening. All right. Certainly if it's a video game, it can't.